This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abuel-Samad from Navigant Research, and unfortunately, Rebecca is not with us today. She is tending to her mother, her elderly mother, who's in the hospital, and hopefully she gets better quick.
Yeah, so you can email your well wishes to Rebecca at wheelbearings.media. I think that's her email.
Yep, that is. We got nice, simple ones now.
All right, she's going to be like, what is this, guys? What happened? So, but yeah, that is a...
And speaking of emails, we've got a whole bunch of them that we've gotten in the last couple of weeks since we published our new address, and we'll be talking about some of those later on in the show.
Did we get any from a Nigerian prince?
Sadly, no. No offers to transfer vast sums of money into our accounts temporarily for a share of that. But we did get one from Australia that we definitely want to talk about.
All right. Well, we'll get to it shortly. Let's start with cars. And what have we been driving? What have you been in, Sam?
Well, since last we spoke, I've been in a couple of different vehicles. I was in the Honda Passport Elite. And Rebecca and I both, we talked about it earlier this year when we did Rebecca and I did the first drive out in Utah, and I had a chance to spend a week with one out here. And, just for those who don't recall the Passport, it is Honda's new sort of upper mid-sized SUV that they launched this year, it's based on the Pilot. So it's actually the same wheelbase as the Pilot, but it's got a 9-inch shorter body. So it's been cut down from a 3-row family truckster down to just a 2-row that's intended to be more of a lifestyle vehicle, for somebody who doesn't need something quite as massive as the Pilot, but wants lots of space for their gear for camping or even some light off-roading. And when we drove it in Utah, it did pretty good on some trails around Moab. It's there's certainly going to be areas where, for example, you would take a Jeep Wrangler where you're not going to be able to follow with something like this. But for most of what most SUV buyers are looking for, it's going to handle everything just fine. Especially, things like when you get into, winter conditions, and you get snow and ice and things like that. It'll, especially and you put some snow tires on it, winter tires on it, it'll probably do well. I had a chance to spend a week with it, and garner a little more experience with this thing. And, overall, I still, it's fine. I generally like it. It's a decent looking vehicle. I think, it's a little more sporty. I guess not really sporty looking, but, its proportions are definitely very different from the Pilot because, it is so much shorter.
Yeah, it's a little tidier. It looks better.
Yeah, definitely. Whereas definitely a lot shorter overhangs than the Pilot, which, it certainly helps, if you are going to do some off-roading, you've got some better approach and departure angles, things like that. Interior is not substantially different from a Pilot, which means that, for example, you get the same infotainment system that you get in other any other Hondas introduced in the last couple of years, for better or ill. It does have a volume knob on there, which is good. The
rest of the infotainment isn't that bad. It's not as bad as
it's not bad at all. It's actually a pretty decent system as touchscreen infotainment systems go. And you got lots of cargo space in the back, including a nice deep well in the back. There's a panel that flips up and, gives you an unlined storage well in the back to, if you're going to put wet stuff boots, hiking boots or other gear that you want to keep separated. You can put that stuff in the back there and then load in your other things on top of that. As I said, 2-row, 5-seater, quite comfortable. Overall, generally a decent ride. It's got plenty of performance with the 3.5 liter V6. About 300 horsepower in that thing, or 280 horsepower, I should say. One thing I did notice when driving this one that I hadn't noticed during the earlier drive of the Passport. The adaptive cruise control. This one, like all other current Hondas or mainstream Hondas, the Passport, comes with the full Honda Sensing suite. So you get adaptive cruise control, lane keeping alert, automatic emergency braking, and assorted other features. The adaptive cruise control in this one is not a full stop-start system, which means that it does cut out at about around 20 miles an hour. So if you're driving it in traffic, you do need to pay attention, because if you're in stop and go traffic, when you get down to 20 miles an hour, the ACC is going to disengage, and at that point, if you don't have your foot on the brakes, you're going to keep coasting. So you do need to pay attention to that. But other than that, the rest of it is fine. Collision mitigation braking, which is nice. When it detects an impending collision, it'll automatically apply some braking for you. The lane departure, lane keeping assist system that Honda has is okay. It's certainly not as aggressive as some systems. It's not going to try to center you in the lane. It will, as you drift out of the lane, it'll try to put some steering input in to kind of nudge you back. But if you don't respond, and it's a tighter curve, the vehicle will continue drifting out of the lane. So you do have to watch for that. So keep in mind, this is not an autopilot type of system. It's definitely a step down from that, or a couple of steps down. But overall, I think it's generally a good vehicle overall. It gets decent, reasonably decent fuel economy, about 21 miles per gallon combined, and I think I got about 20 overall during my week with it. And the base price for the Elite trim, which is the top level trim, is $43,680. All in with the destination handling, came to $44,725. So it's in the ballpark of where other vehicles in this segment are. It's perhaps not the most up to date in terms of some of the tech, most sophisticated in terms of some of the tech, but it hits most of the check marks that you want to hit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually had the chance to drive it a few weeks ago as well. And I forget what I stepped out of. And it might have been a Mitsubishi, like an Outlander PHEV, or the Eclipse Cross. I forget. But I just remember getting in the Honda, and everything felt like it should operate together. It felt like they actually drove it and made all the systems work together. So it was actually really good to drive from a driver's perspective. The controls work quite harmoniously together. And it is like, it's like a right size Pilot. If the Pilot feels alternately sort of too big and too small at this, depending on the situation, it's not quite one of those.
For a 3-row, it's on the smaller size, of a lot of 3-rows, compared to, say the Hyundai Palisade or the Kia Telluride. It feels a little smaller than those. But at the same time, it's if you don't actually need a 3-row, then it's it's a little bit too much, and the Passport is almost just the right size.
Yeah, I like the Passport a lot, and price wise, I think it's pretty competitive within the range. I'm a little confused at how Honda still keeps trying to sell it as an SUV, which I think is just the way they want to position it, and the way they imagine both the Pilot and the Passport is that, these are our SUVs because we don't make, traditional body on frame trucks. And that's fine. I think
to be honest, even, the most SUV-ish of SUVs these days, like Jeeps, are unibody designs anyway.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the big selling points for me in the Grand Cherokee, was that it's not a full frame vehicle, because I don't need to be hauling that kind of weight around. And our Jeep has not really ever done anything off road other than, turn around in the backyard. And so that's like, accept what people use them for. But I think that they're still sort of selling the sort of like, if you needed to, you could kind of aspect of it, which is fine. And it's a good vehicle. People are going to like it. I was a little dismayed by the interior quality for the price. It's a nice interior. It's a Honda interior. It's just nice, but it also still feels kind of austere. And that's, I think, just sort of a personal preference kind of thing. Maybe some color would help.
I think, again, if you compare it against that Palisade, then it certainly is perhaps a little more austere feeling. It doesn't have quite the premium feel of a Palisade. But it's still perfectly adequate, and
Oh yeah, for sure.
especially if you go for one of the lower trim levels like the Sport or the EXL. Sport starts at 32, 33 delivered. EXL's 37. So it's they're definitely reasonably affordable for this class of vehicle.
Yeah, I'll agree there. And I think given the choices, the Honda is going to feel really light on its feet. It's got a lot of thoughtful features that are pretty well thought out, and it has the Honda reputation for holding up. Or there's the alternate Honda reputation where you get grumpy people who tell you, they're not all they're cracked up to be. So it has that Honda reputation too. But generally they come out pretty well on quality and durability and satisfaction. So
the all-wheel drive system is based on it's a variation of the super handling all-wheel drive that they have on the Acuras. So it's the same basic technology in there. So it has torque vectoring, side-to-side torque vectoring as well as front to rear. Yeah. Which, you don't get on the Pilot. So that does give it some extra capability when you're in low traction conditions.
I wonder if that's the basically the powertrain that Acura just put in that SLX that they did up for Radwood.
I think it probably is. Yeah, it's probably the same thing.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say about that, right? Unless we're gonna.
Yeah. No. I mean, if you're in the market for midsize utility, midsize 2-row utility, this is definitely one that you should be taking a look at. Depending on what you're looking for, it may or may not be your best choice, but it's definitely one that should be on your list.
Well, let's ping pong a little bit because we're still on. So we can stay on crossovers and we can talk about 3-rows, and then we'll come back to we can finish up with the sedans that we both had as well. But I was able to drive the 2020 Dodge Durango SRT, which is like 3 rows, no waiting. And it snowed while we had it, and first of all, it's hard not to like the Durango, right? It's comfortable. It's an extra long Grand Cherokee, so it's actually based on the old Commander. If you look on the underside of the second row seats, when you flip them up, the decal still has a line drawing of a Commander.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah. It's kind of funny. It makes me laugh. But it's not the most accessible third row. It's not the biggest third row, but overall, like it's a sort of occasional use third row, so it's fine.
It's kind of like the Pilot in that respect. It's kind of more of an upper midsize than really a full size utility.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But where it differs from the Pilot is it has the big Hemi, the 6.4 liter.
Oh, yes.
The 392, which is like 435 horsepower or something. And it sounds fantastic. and it's just like, it's one of those cars that you just rev in the driveway and you're like, that sounds pretty damn good. I could do this for a while.
That is and will be, probably the single biggest thing I'll miss, someday when we transition all over to electrics. Is that sound of engines like that, especially big V8s. There's just something you can't, and it's not just the sound, you also feel the vibration of it, so it's, it is really a visceral thing.
I think you can probably replicate some of that with like a tank of compressed air and an actual like.
But some really big haptic actuators in the chassis, So
well, I mean, it's just you use little valves, right? Because that's all it is. Yeah. It's 8 poppet valves opening into a length of pipe. So it's like a pipe organ. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's extra hardware to carry, just to rumble.
You need some weights, rotating around too, though.
That's true.
It's more, I mean, the sound, it's the valves, but you also need that, that little rumble of a V8.
That's true. I walk around because I'm attuned to sound. I noticed you walk around the side of it as you get sort of towards the front of it, you can hear the valve train, the push rods, and the rockers and stuff all actuating that you don't necessarily get on an overhead cam engine because they've got it. It's all quieted down with sound absorbing or sound blocking valve covers. Where they've done as well as they could with the Hemi too. It's pretty quiet, but you can still, if you listen for it, you can hear the push rod actuation. And it's how are you going to complain with it? A family SUV that has a big V8, it's lowered, it's got a pretty disciplined chassis, it's got the very comfortable SRT seats. And in the second row is captain's chairs, individual captain's chairs. It's a great family car. It's complete overkill. It's basically like if you wanted a Challenger but you needed more, this is your option. And
there is one more thing they could do to this, though. They could drop a Hellcat in it.
They could.
I'm frankly surprised that they haven't yet.
Well, because the people who are buying the Hellcat are going to buy the Jeep and they're going to pay more for it.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, you can get a Trackhawk. That's fine.
Yeah. You can't get a 3-row Trackhawk.
Correct. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much of a market there might be for that, but if there's anybody who's good at sort of exploring those niches, it's
a wide body Hellcat Durango. Come on,
I take
it. Would be awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It would get about 10 miles to the gallon. This one got about 14. So. And I didn't drive it hard. It's just, you know, and it's funny when you actually get into the big Hemi, there's a lot of power there, but there's also a lot of weight. And
oh yeah,
so it doesn't feel maybe as muscular as it sounds like it should be. It's definitely powerful, but it could use more. And I was amused actually too in the infotainment system in the Uconnect. They have like all the performance screens because it's the SRT, so it has the SRT screens where it has like a real time dyno and you know, gauges and stuff. So you can actually just. I drove around for a little while just playing with that stuff. My 11-year-old was fascinated. You know, you take off fast from a stoplight and you watch the dyno trace go up, and it's rather amusing.
It's all rather silly, but you know, it's fun.
Yeah, and it's a fun car, and it was about, I think it was like $77,000. So you pay for it. You can get a Durango much cheaper in the mid 30s if you need a nice one, and it'll do pretty much all the things that this one did outside of the performance trappings, which you really. Again, like, you know what you're buying when you buy this, but if you just need a 3-row car, just don't get the SRT. Just get a 3-row. And the suspension is a little bit stiff. Was sort of my only real gripe. And we had it actually over Thanksgiving. So the day after Thanksgiving, we usually go get the Christmas tree, and I really wanted to take it, but it didn't have roof rails. And I didn't want to put the tree on the top without roof rails. So I threw the rack on the Jeep, and we took the Jeep. It was an interesting contrast because there's the same basic vehicle. And our Grand Cherokee feels a lot squishier compared to the Durango SRT. But it feels lighter on its feet too. That big Hemi has a lot of weight. You know, it is. It's the Challenger SUV or Challenger crossover.
Pretty much, yeah. And you know, it does. The SRT does start at 58.5. So you know, you don't have to spend $70,000 plus on one of these things.
Yeah.
So there's clearly a lot of options in the one you had.
Yes. Oh, it was it had the screens. It had the HDMI connectors, which they have copied Hyundai, Kia and Hyundai with they put them in the edge of the seats, the edge of the front seats.
Oh, okay. That's cool. So that's a good approach.
Yeah. It's a very thoughtful family SUV in that sense. It has plenty of cargo space. It diminished a bit when you fold up the third row, but you could still get some stuff in there. You know, we managed to get all of Thanksgiving dinner in there because we traveled, we cooked, and then we went across town. So we had all that stuff, the dog, the kids. It's a good sort of 3-row that you don't need to use the third row all the time. It had a tow hitch on it, and with that large engine, it can tow with authority, I'm sure. So it has a lot of just practical charms, and I love the Durango overall. It's just a really nice execution. It's been around for a while. You know what you're going to get. FCA is going to keep milking it until they absolutely can't, and I don't see anything wrong with that. So let's move on to sedans.
Something perhaps slightly more sensible than a big V8 SUV.
Extremely sensible. You were in the 2020 Toyota Avalon Hybrid.
Indeed.
So all the fuel I used, you didn't.
That's right. I was saving it for you. I mean, the Avalon is a big sedan, and it always has been, fairly large and roomy. It's basically, a Camry Plus or a Camry Max, depending on which smartphone company's terminology you want to use. But in its current iteration, it's actually a pretty decent looking vehicle too. It's aside, depending on how you feel about, really massive grills, the Camry or the Avalon does have, a maximum grill aperture in the front. Most of it is blanked off so that there's actually no airflow through it. But, they really want you to know, when you walk up to this thing that, yes, you are driving a Toyota Avalon.
It's not that offensive though, right?
No, it's not offensive, but it is huge.
What it looks like to me? It looks like one of those like Gillette razors with like 9 blades.
Yeah, pretty much. Aside from that, the rest of it, I think is an attractive design. As with most modern sedans, they've gone to more of the fastback look on it, which is fine. I think it's got decent proportions to it, and it's really roomy inside. Both in the front and the back. It has the Toyota's 2.5 liter 4-cylinder Atkinson 4-cylinder engine with their hybrid powertrain. So basically the same thing you get in the Camry hybrid or in the new 2020 Highlander hybrid that's coming shortly. And it's got more than adequate performance. Let me find it here.
More than adequate. That's
yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what they were going for.
It's no SRT. But it's about 200 horsepower, which is fine. For something that you're going to drive around, that you're going to use as a daily commuter. It does fine. And you can pop it into sport mode or put it in eco mode and maximize your electric driving with it. And this thing's rated 43 miles per gallon, city highway and combined, which for a big sedan like this is really impressive. I got about 40 overall during my week with it, but it was fairly cold, and I didn't really try to be as efficient as I could. I just drove it normally, and got 40 miles per gallon with it, which for to get that kind of mileage with a big sedan like this, that's better than we typically got with our diesel Jetta when we had that. And this thing's got a lot of room inside.
Right, it's bigger. You don't have any of the nonsense that you've got with the modern diesel, where you've got the SCR fluid and all that, and
right.
You're running regular fuel in it too, not mid-grade or premium. So
yeah, and when you're cruising through your neighborhood, at 25 miles an hour, it's typically running just on electricity alone. So it's rolling along silently, so you can sneak up on people, which can be fun.
What exactly are you up to?
I don't know, but when you're pulling into the neighborhood, it's you don't necessarily want to be rattling everybody's windows. So it depends on your mood, I guess. But it's good in that respect. The seats are comfortable. The interior is really nice. It's got some nice stitching on the leather. Nice leather, some real wood trim. The biggest gripe I have with this one, as with other modern Toyotas, is probably the infotainment system, which is better than it used to be, but it's still not as good as it could be.
Well, so this is did you have the limited?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the nicest execution, but their infotainment, it's like a tombstone in the middle of the maybe tombstone's not the best way to describe it, but it's just on this panel that just like sticks up. It's an interesting take on that, the way everybody tacks on the screens. This is sort of integrated with all the center stack controls.
In this case, the center stack kind of sweeps up from the console, sweeps all the way up, and it's integrated, in this sort of wave that comes up, that kind of stands out in front of the dash. And like other modern vehicles, they have moved the center touchscreen up higher. So again, it's closer to your line of sight, but it's still a touchscreen, which, as regular listeners know, I am fundamentally opposed to in cars, and I think should be banned. But and we'll talk about more about that next week when Rebecca's back, when we have a chance to talk about the Mazda CX-30. But the screen is better than most. The screen itself, the display, is better than what I've seen on many recent Toyotas. It doesn't have quite as much trouble with polarized sunglasses, things like that. This one did have a heads-up display, which also worked well. But just the interface, was kind of iffy. It wasn't always as responsive as I'd like it to be. And it does have support for CarPlay, Apple CarPlay. Does not have support for Android Auto yet. At some point, they will be adding that in, and it's supposed to be. I believe it's the Avalon is one of the cars that's supposed to be eligible for a retrofit to add Android Auto support to it at some point in the not too distant future.
I mean, that's just software, right? It's just
no, actually, there's a hardware module that has to go in there as well.
Really? Wow, that's interesting.
For authentication. So that is one of the issues. And actually, as long as we're speaking about CarPlay, I have talked to a few other manufacturers, and there is hardware that's associated with both of the projection systems, with CarPlay and Android Auto, for communications and the authentication. But as far as I can tell from speaking to other manufacturers, Apple and Google do not charge any sort of ongoing licensing fee for using that software. And this week, BMW finally backed off on their previous announcement that they were going to charge a subscription fee on their cars for Apple CarPlay. They had been charging a $300 premium, one-time premium for CarPlay, or you could pay for an $80 a year subscription to use CarPlay, which in both, for every other manufacturer, they just roll the price into the sticker price of the car or the upgraded infotainment system that supports it. But nobody else in the industry was trying to charge a subscription fee for CarPlay, which
not even Porsche.
Not even Porsche.
Right.
So that was just ridiculous. And they finally backed off on that. So now, they're not doing this. You still have to pay $300 up front, but the subscription is gone. Toyota is not charging any kind of extra fee except for whatever you're paying for any of the upgraded infotainment systems. I don't think the base infotainment system supports CarPlay, but all the other ones have it included. And in this case, you get it's a 14 speaker or is it 14 or 14 speaker JBL system with a subwoofer and amp, and it sounds pretty good. You've got 4 USB ports in here, and lots of other goodies. There's a Qi wireless charger, so you can just drop your phone on that.
So do those? I have a question about those. I try them, and they seem to work for a few minutes, and then they stop working. And I don't know whether it's because my phone is in a case or whatever, but I can never make them work reliably, no matter what car and across multiple phones.
That is your case pretty thick?
Right now it's not. In the past it had been, and I was like, okay, it's just the case. Right now,
sometimes the case can interfere with it if it's a really thick case. Usually the thinner cases work fine. It might just be your phone too, because I've not had any problems with it.
Well, I mean, we now have an iPhone that I begrudgingly moved to. So it's been interesting actually using Apple CarPlay. I didn't realize there's a little hardware for authentication that they need for it. I thought it was just software. That must be just sort of a little IC chip or something that allows.
Yeah, I mean it's not expensive hardware. I mean it's only a few bucks to add that hardware into the system, but there is some hardware that's involved. And
the thing with CarPlay is it's one of those things that auto writers will gripe about, like settings or learning the screen layout, is because once you get it set up in a single car that you're going to have for a period of years, it's fine. But because we're jumping from car to car to car, every single time you pair it with a new car, if you have your icons and stuff laid out in a different way, you have to go and redo that within
Yep.
CarPlay, versus having it like store those settings and show up across multiple vehicles. So that's kind of it's not even a gripe. It's just one of the things that I'm realizing is the way it works. That's all.
Yeah, and I mean, when we're reviewing stuff, we need to take some care in how we talk about that, because the average person that's going to go out and buy or lease one of these things and live with it for, multiple years, after, a week or two, they're probably going to get accustomed to, how a particular system works. And, we have, that classic first world problem of, dealing with different cars every week. And, so you have to have that, make that mental shift every time you jump into a different car. And, so it's generally not as much of a problem for most consumers, but we have to think of it. What we need to look for is the kinds of things that you're not necessarily going to get used to, or that, they're things that are going to irritate you for the long haul, and things like a slow interface, or, even just, kind of a non-intuitive interface, even though you get accustomed to it, it's still not necessarily a good thing. I mean, a user interface, for something, especially something that's designed to be used while you're driving, should be simple and clean. And there are some aspects of the Toyota interface that are fine, because, on the main home screen, you can put some shortcuts on there to the people that you call most often, for example. But, you do have to go, dig down sometimes, a couple layers through menus, or, take multiple taps to get to a particular piece of information that you want on the screen. And that, that's non-optimal when you're driving, especially with a touchscreen, where, you're reaching out, and as you're driving, the end of your arm where your finger is going to be tending to move around a little bit. And, you want to have nice large touch targets to hit. And, this is one of the things that we'll talk about with Mazda that they emphasized a lot, is their whole strategy around their infotainment system. But we'll talk about that next time.
All right. So I didn't mean to get us off track on the Avalon, but the Limited, it's a nice interior. It's they're getting better. Toyota's getting better with their infotainment. It's interesting how Toyota and Honda both they're leaders in the market, no matter what class they're in, they're generally they're the safe choices, right? They've become established as,
you're generally not going to go wrong with buying either a Toyota or a Honda.
Right. But their infotainment, both of those companies have had infotainment that has lagged everybody else, or significantly lagged what we've known to be, or what we've sort of crowned in our infinite wisdom as automotive journalists as the class of the field. You get into a Hyundai or a Kia, the infotainment's a lot better. It's a lot more intuitive. It's a lot easier to use. Uconnect has gotten praise over and over again, although it's starting to get a little crappier. I was less impressed with Uconnect in the Durango than in past iterations, because it is like a lot of screen, the stuff is being driven by the screen that shouldn't be, and its menus are a little buried now. But there's other stuff out there that's better, and they're still playing catch up on that side of things.
Right, and that's when we get a chance to try out the Ford Sync 4 system that's launching next year. It'll be interesting to see how that works in practice. I've played with it a little bit in demos. And particularly the large screen version, what they've done with that is really try to get the things that you're using all the time at the top level, so that you don't have to go down through menus. It's all right there, and have nice big cards and touch targets. And at least playing with it on a kiosk, or even in a prototype, it seems to work. It seems to work better. But we'll see how that works out. How that plays out on the 10-inch and 8-inch screens, that will be, the volume players for that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we'll wrap up the car segment here. Speaking of Hyundai and Kia, I had a Genesis, which is neither Hyundai or Kia. It is a Genesis, Genesis
and
G70.
Don't you forget it.
They're correct. This is the 3.3T with the all-wheel drive. So this is a fantastic car, and it reminds me of the best 3 Series from like the E46, E90 generation. It has a great chassis. It's got lots of power. It's really well behaved. It handles great, rides nicely. It could use a little bit more steering feel. The steering's still a bit numb. The ergonomics are really, really good. They did such a great job on this car, and it's a shame because nobody's going to buy it. It's a small sedan. It's tight like those older 3 Series were. It's the back seat is sort of, it reminds me of that class of car. It reminds me of the S60s that we had where, the front seat's fine, but you try to get like people in the back and you're like, oh, it's actually a little tinier than it would seem. So it's a great driver's car. It's a great sort of 1+ if it's you and somebody else with an occasional use back seat. It's like the old Lexus IS series as well, or maybe even the current one is still a little tight. I forget. It's been a while since I've been in one of those, but it's really that sort of entry near luxury performance class of sedan. And I like it a lot better than the last 3 Series I drove, which to me it started to get kind of big, and the latest 3 Series rotates funny. It doesn't behave the way I prefer them to behave, I guess, or the way I remember them behaving. This car, and I know why it behaves this way, is because Genesis has a lot of former German performance premium car people working for them, and I think it was the chassis was Albert Biermann.
Albert Biermann is in charge of R&D and vehicle development at Hyundai Motor Group now, so he oversees all the vehicle development for the 3 brands, for Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis now.
Yeah, and he came from BMW M, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's pretty good pedigree. It's have you driven the G70? I'm really impressed.
I've driven the 2-liter turbo. I haven't driven the V6, the turbo V6 yet.
I've heard that the turbo V6 is the one to get. I haven't driven the 4-cylinder, and I'd really like to, because that's the one you can get with a manual.
And that one's really nicely balanced. The lighter weight of the 4-cylinder, gives it even better balance than the V6.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the one, I guess, criticism is there's a lot of power and a lot of potential here. And it's been snowy, so I haven't really had a chance to try to ring it out on a curvy back road or anything. What I have been able to do within reason, because I don't want to hit black ice and wind up in trees, it handles really well, and it's a car you can hustle, and it will enjoy being hustled. So as a driver's car, I think it does hit the mark. But the V6 is almost like you might not need that much power, which I hate saying.
There's nothing wrong with that, especially, if it's a car that you're driving out on the road as opposed to taking to the track. You can have so much fun with something that's got a little bit less power. It can still be a blast to drive, and you can do it at speeds, that aren't necessarily going to, as I've said before, aren't necessarily going to get you in trouble. So you can still hustle it along. And, when you look at, things like modern turbocharged 4-cylinder engines, they are really amazing compared to what you got in a V6 or a V8 15 or 20 years ago.
That's true. And the torque curve from those little 4s with the lots of turbo on them is really impressive. It's shaped like a table. Yep. it goes up and stays up. It feels really planted too, trying things like on ramps and just seeing how you can stomp on the brake and get that little bit of rotation out of it and stuff. It's not a car that's going to get loose on you. So the just sort of the basis of the chassis is there. You shut off all the stability and traction control. It still behaves. It's not something that's using electronics to manage the fundamentally evil chassis. So it's a really, really good compact sports sedan in the idiom of the 3 Series that sort of set the mold. And other than the steering needing a little bit more weight, or feedback, really, the weight is fine. It's a little tight. It's not a big car, and they offer other models if you want more space.
Yeah, I mean, if you need a little more space, on the same platform, you can get the Kia Stinger, which is the same platform but with a little more wheelbase, and so you get a little more room. And that one, because the Stinger is a hatchback, you also have that extra practicality there. If you need to carry large stuff, you can drop the back seat down and stick stuff in through that hatch, and it's a little more useful sometimes.
Yeah, the Stinger doesn't feel quite as premium because it's a Kia versus the Genesis, and that's what Genesis is really going for, is that sort of premium outfitting. And this has the nice quilted leather seats, and the trim is nice. All the materials are really good. The plastic trim on everything you touch, almost, I think it's flocked in some way. It has a coating on it that's it's like a non-slip coating. It feels nice, and they're really paying attention to all aspects of what makes cars feel premium and it sets that impression. How well it's going to hold up is another story. And I know that's always the crappy criticism that people sort of giveth and taketh away with Genesis. It's like, well, it's a Hyundai. We'll see how long they last. Hyundais tend to be around for quite a while.
Hyundais have good reliability and durability scores, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
I say that in particular, though, just noting that from what I've heard of the long-term tests of the Stinger, people, magazines and stuff have noted that those particular cars that they've tested feel like they loosen up. They develop some rattles and stuff over time. Now, again, take it for what it's worth. Those are, a small sampling of very picky people who are probably pushing those cars a lot harder.
Spending a lot more time at the track than your average consumer.
But I think overall the hardware, the powertrain is going to hold up, and either or. I really liked the Stinger when I drove that a while back too. So,
and I'd highly recommend that you go buy a G70 now before they maximize the grille on this thing too, like they did with the G90.
They're all good looking though. I mean, I really like what Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, what they're doing styling wise. They're a force to be reckoned with. I think they're really making smart choices, and they're being aggressive, and they're a company to watch. And I don't know how well they're being established, but as somebody who just watches the industry, they're doing a lot of stuff, and they've been doing a lot of really good stuff for the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The whole Hyundai Motor Group, and Genesis is finally going to get its first SUV in the near future. The GV80 is coming soon. I'm not sure when they'll actually launch it, but within the next few months, it'll be making its debut, perhaps at the New York Auto Show in the spring. But it's not far off, and I've seen them running around here. I live just a few miles away from the Hyundai Tech Center here outside of Ann Arbor, and so I've seen some of the camo GV80s running around, and it will, if what you're looking for is the same kind of style, in something like a utility, God knows why, but if that's what you must have, they'll have that option too. And I think that's perhaps where the Genesis brand may really start to take off. If they can translate these kinds of driving behaviors, and the premium feel, into utility vehicles, then I think the market may start to take notice. And maybe at that point, once the Genesis brand starts to get a little more attention for that, then maybe customers will say, "Oh, wait a minute, these guys make cars too, and some pretty damn interesting cars." Especially the G70 and G80. Then hopefully that will provide a bit of a halo effect to those models as well.
Which is so backwards from what it used to be, but I mean, okay. I know. I mean, you can easily imagine a garage that right now might be filled with a 5 Series and an X5, being filled with a G80 and a GV80, or a G70 and a GV80. Like there's those same choices there. They're going to have to focus, I think, on the premium design and premium outfitting, versus necessarily sort of the performance when they move up to sport utilities. But they're smart, and I think they'll do well. I hope.
Yeah, I'm confident in them.
It's always good to have more interesting choices and more product and across the lineup. They're interesting stuff. So let's hit some stories. General Motors and LG Chem have announced a joint venture. They're going to put the Lordstown plant to use, right? That's
not exactly.
Okay.
So So this is a report that actually first cropped up back in September at the beginning of the GM UAW strike. And there were reports that part of the deal that GM had offered to the union was to convert the Lordstown assembly plant into a battery plant. And the deal that was offered was that, rather than being a full up GM plant, it would actually be a joint venture with at that time an unannounced battery supplier, to build batteries, lithium-ion batteries, or rather lithium-ion cells for GM's upcoming fleet of electric vehicles. And the union rejected that offer because, first of all, GM was insisting on a lower wage tier for the people working at that plant, so it would have been about half the wages, half the hourly rate that the people building the crews were getting, and it would also be a lot fewer people. Part of the problem with building batteries, especially cells, is that it's a very highly automated process. So they had at one point, I think about over 5,000 people working at the Lordstown assembly plant building crews on a couple of different shifts, and for the battery plant, they're looking to eventually get up to 1,100 jobs, which is obviously better than no jobs, but it's a lot less, and so that was part of what led into the strike. Ultimately, following after the strike was settled, GM decided to sell off the Lordstown plant to Lordstown Motors, which is a startup founded by one of the founders of Workhorse Group, an electric truck manufacturer, and essentially, gave them the plant for nothing because
the Tesla model.
Yeah, it's basically the Tesla model, and actually, the same thing goes for Rivian. Rivian got the old Mitsubishi plant in Normal, Illinois, for effectively nothing, and what Lordstown Motors is going to have to do now is raise several $100 million to convert that plant from building front wheel drive cruises to electric pickup trucks and vans. So that's their chances of success in actually getting that operation up and running, I think, are pretty limited. But that aside, this new deal is actually for a new greenfield site in Lordstown, not far from where the Lordstown assembly plant is. It's in the same area, but this is a brand new facility that they're doing a joint venture, 50-50 joint venture with LG Chem. And LG Chem is one of the biggest battery suppliers in the world, along with Panasonic, CATL out of China, Samsung SDI, and SK Innovation. And LG supplies the batteries used, or the cells used, by most of GM's electrified vehicles. They supplied the batteries for the Volt, now for the Bolt EV. Some of the hybrids, the plug-in hybrids that GM was doing, all had LG cells. Ford's using LG for the Mustang Mach-E. Audi and Jaguar are using LG for their batteries. So this is a major supplier of batteries. It's a $2.3 billion investment, split 50-50 between the two companies. And this plant will build only cells, no battery packs, just the cells. And when it's complete, sometime around 2023, when it's fully ramped up, it'll have about 30 gigawatt hours of capacity, which if you assume an average of 90 kilowatt hours per vehicle, that works out to about enough for about 330,000 vehicles a year. And one of the first new EVs that GM's launching is their electric pickup truck, which may or may not be called a Hummer, or it may be a Silverado, or who knows. But they're going to break ground on this new plant next year in early 2020 and start construction and get it up and running in the next couple of years.
Well, so I'm stuck a little bit on the union stuff, where it really seemed like GM was the hardest part of all the union negotiations this time around. Ford and FCA both seemed to get through it a little bit easier, so that was kind of interesting to watch. But yeah, I mean, Lordstown is never going to really sort of return. At least from what it seems like, it's not going to be what it was. There's going to be, between this and Workhorse, what, maybe a couple thousand jobs overall in
probably.
that area. Yeah,
and many of the people that were working in the Lordstown assembly plant have since transferred to other GM plants, so they've moved away, and they've gone to work at other GM plants, in Ohio and in Michigan. So many of them have new jobs already, but some of them that have stuck around Lordstown may end up getting jobs at this new battery plant. And
this is the Vega plant, isn't it? Lordstown was for the Vega.
Well, the Lordstown assembly plant. So keep separating the cell plant from the assembly plant.
Right.
The assembly plant was where they built the Vega back in the 1970s. And it's actually a pretty old plant. I think it was originally built in the 1950s. I can't remember what they built before Vega, but yeah, it was the home of the Vega, and then many other vehicles over the years, finally ending up with the Cruise. But during the conference call, during the announcement on Thursday, Mary Barra was asked. She's the CEO of GM. She was asked, if this plant would be unionized, and her response was interesting. She said, because this is a joint venture plant, this is not a General Motors plant. This is a new company that is 50% owned by GM, 50% owned by LG Chem. It will be up to the employees at the plant if they want to be represented by the union.
Norma Ray, get it done.
So it may or may not end up being unionized. I suspect it probably will end up being unionized, but there's no guarantee of that. And again, they're going with the lower wage tier that GM typically has for their supplier plants, which is about $17 an hour. And I said that the number of people working there, because the cell production is an inherently more automated process. Unlike assembling engines or installing dashboards and seats into cars, this is not something you have humans involved in a whole lot. So even at full capacity, the plant is only expected to employ about 1,100 people, as opposed to up to 5,000 that were working in the Lordstown assembly plant.
So with battery assembly too, and batteries themselves, there's a lot of chemistry involved. Mm-hmm. Does that pose any environmental hazard? Like, what's the risk for those people that are making $17 an hour to be around, lithium and all, whatever, I forget whatever else is in, there's lots of minerals and just there's stuff that can hurt you. And
yeah, I mean, there's always some potential hazard there, but because of the need for the stuff, the main part of what you're talking about there is the coatings that go on the electrodes, and because that stuff needs to be really pure. These processes are typically done in green room or clean room environments.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like building chips. You don't want any impurities in this stuff. So it's very highly ventilated, and typically when I took a tour a couple of years ago of LG's plant in Holland, Michigan, on the west side of Michigan. When you go into these sections of the plant where they're doing things like coating the electrode material, these are positive pressure areas of the plant. So they're not, they don't want to suck anything in. They don't want to suck in any dust or anything. So when you open the doors, you're typically going through almost like an airlock.
Yeah. Did you have to booty up?
We had to booty up. Put on the bunny suits like you do in a chip factory.
Yeah, or a marijuana production facility. I found out.
Well, either one, yeah. Never been in one of those, so
I was at first. It was very interesting. It's actually really, really high tech in that sense. Because again, they don't want any contamination. So
right, and so there's not a lot of direct interaction, with the production process, where you're talking about these chemicals. As far as kind of the broader range of this joint venture, speaking of chemistry, GM and LG Chem, as part of this joint venture, are working together on cell development and cell chemistry development and future types of cell production. So they'll probably be looking at things like solid state cells eventually, and areas like that. And also the other thing that Barra was asked was whether whether this plant would be supplying cells to other manufacturers, to other car makers, and she didn't rule that out. She said, it'll depend on how because this is a business that has to be profitable in its own right. It's a separate business unit. They will do whatever they need to sell as much capacity as they can, and if we're not using it, they'll be free to sell it to anybody else, basically. So
hey, that's how it goes for their normal stuff. I mean, you got cars all over the history of automaking that have GM transmissions and HVAC and stuff in them. So yeah, if they're smart, they'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, 10 years ago when they were developing the first generation Volt, at that time, companies like GM, were talking about batteries not necessarily being a core competency of the company. It was something that they were relying on their suppliers for. And increasingly that's something that's shifting. As they've shifted, as many car makers have started to shift away from internal combustion to electrification, they're increasingly treating both battery, motor design, and power electronics as areas that they need to have internal core competency in. Not necessarily, manufacturing it all themselves, but understanding the technology and being responsible for the design and development of it. So, for example, at the LA Auto Show, BMW had a workshop on what they're doing with batteries. They've set up a new battery cell competence center in Munich, and going forward, they are developing the chemistry for all of their cells in-house, and working with suppliers to actually do the volume production. So they have some small prototype level production capability to build test cells and develop those. But then when it comes to actually producing them in volume for production vehicles, they'll go out to an LG or Samsung or CATL or SK to actually mass manufacture them. Ford also has a similar lab that they operate in conjunction with the University of Michigan for the last several years, where they've been doing cell development internally, developing the chemistries in-house, and then going out to their suppliers like LG to do the manufacturing for vehicles like the Mach-E. And the other area that companies including Volkswagen and BMW are getting into is the sourcing of the raw materials. They are, BMW and Volkswagen have both put in long-term supply contracts for the raw materials so they can ensure that they have a steady supply of the materials needed to build these batteries. Because the raw materials turn out to be about 85 to 90% of the cost of the cell. And, they want to make sure that they have a steady supply. And, so they've gone out and done the sourcing themselves. And then whoever they select as their manufacturing partner, they'll supply those raw materials to that manufacturing partner. And, in this case with GM and LG, it's a little bit different because they're doing a joint venture, but, still they're getting more directly involved in, this production of this core component of electric vehicles.
Yeah, well, it's a smart way to do it, is to sort of create the spec that can be produced in volume, and then have somebody else do the volume manufacturing for you. Seems like it's a pretty well-established convention in manufacturing and other spaces. So I think that's smart of them.
Yeah, and this probably won't be the last battery plant that GM invests in over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I mean, they say they're going to have 20 to 23 cars in the next few years.
Yeah, 20 EVs by 2023. Barra did recommit to that target.
Yeah, so that's a lot of work to do.
Yep.
All right. Let's jump to the next couple of things.
There are reports this week, that Mazda, is thinking about electrification for the next generation Miata, which is probably still, the car's probably still about 5 or 6 years away from production. But they're looking at what they need to do for that vehicle, and one of the issues with going all electric on the Miata, is batteries are still heavy and bulky. and the Miata is known for being small and lightweight. Even in its modern iterations, it's still about the same size, and close to the same weight as the original 1990 Miata that I own. And that's about 2,200 pounds for a manual transmission Miata, and it's going to be really hard to get anywhere close to that with an electric version, especially anything with any kind of reasonable range to it. It's hard to see how they're going to pack in enough battery to maintain the kind of the feel of a Miata, especially if you go all electric. Now, hybrid, I could definitely see that being a very feasible approach, doing a hybrid Miata, or maybe even a plug-in hybrid, with maybe a 10-mile electric range. I think that's very feasible. But going all electric, I'm not sure if that's going to be doable, at least in the next 5 to 10 years. What do you think?
I think that the Miata's character is fundamentally different if you electrify it with current technology. I think that it could still be a lot of fun. A hybrid may be a good step to sort of split the difference, but that's a whole lot of investment to make. And if you're ultimately going to go EV, I don't know that investment is a worthwhile investment. You might as well just skip to figuring out the EV immediately, because if that's where you want to go, then go there. If you're going to do a hybrid with like the BMW the i3 idea, where it's mostly EV with a little bit of a range extender for sort of emergency use, that's a little different, but still, that's not really the Miata's character. So it could still be a good time. I mean, Tesla Roadsters were fun. So
they were fun, but they were also $100,000 cars, and they weighed over 3,000 pounds. Which is very different from what a Miata is.
I think, though, if you set your target weight at 3,000 pounds, you could make a Miata have a lot of Miata character with an EV powertrain, and I think you'd still please a lot of people. What I would miss from it is the shifting and the engine. Those are the things that are just not going to be there. But it'll be a really fun sort of point and squirt kind of good handling small roadster. So, it's going to be like 2/3 of the current charm, I think, would be there for it. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess part of the issue, the Miata is not a real high volume vehicle. And so, if you're going to make the investment and, go to the effort of doing an electric vehicle, it seems like you would be better off to do it on something where it's going to have a bigger impact. Bigger environmental impact, bigger impact on your overall fleet average. The Miata, they don't sell that many of them to justify, that kind of investment in it. They would be better off to electrify something like the CX-5 or the CX-30, or even the CX-9 than to go, and that's basically what they did with the MX-30 that they launched at the Tokyo Motor Show. It's kind of in that CX-30 to CX-5 kind of size range, the crossover, and electrified that. To do it with the Miata, I'm not sure that it necessarily makes business sense to do it, but you never know. But I think a hybrid could be interesting.
Yeah, it could be. I just like looking at the amount of money that's going to take for a low volume model. I don't know. But there's like the chicken and the egg thing too. Like the Miata, if you electrify that or hybridize that, you're going to get a lot more attention and a lot more sort of coverage in the media to get your message out. So there's that to think about as well. As if you just do the CX-5, it's another EV kind of thing. So Mazda has a lot of considerations to make, and we'll see where they go. Just hedge our bets and be like, time will tell.
Yep, absolutely, as it always does.
All right, well, let's do this. Let's tee up your interview with Matt Mustephy from Audi, and then we'll come back and we'll answer a couple of questions because you got to speak with Matt at the LA Auto Show. Yeah, and so right before we go to this, I listened to it, and one of the things that stuck out to me was that he said 69% of e-tron buyers want to buy the e-tron because of the ecological consideration versus buying an internal combustion car. That's still like To me, I guess if you're going to be buying a car anyway, that's valid, but it brings me back to the idea that you can't consume your way to conservation, especially buyers at that end of the market. You know, they're all like the character Vizzini in The Princess Bride, who keeps saying like inconceivable. Like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Like, if, you know, conservation were the motivating concern, I'd like to see less consumption from the people who can afford it most. You know, buy quality things by all means, but then adopt a maintainer mindset. You know, keep it as long as possible. So I guess what I'm basically proposing is to completely destroy the economy and, you know, buy Rolls Royces and keep them forever.
What could possibly go wrong with that strategy?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it was a really interesting interview. It was about 20 minutes, and when we're done, we'll come back.
What, about 6 months into e-tron sales now in the U.S. e-tron Quattro? How would you say it's going so far at this point?
We've had certainly some hiccups along the way to getting it started, but once we got through those, I think we're in a better position now. So obviously we had the recall with the charge port that we had to fix that held up a lot of cars at the port for us, and a couple other software updates early along the way that we had to do. But now that that's all out of the way, I'm pretty confident that we should start to see consistent numbers throughout the month of sales. What we saw initially was, you know, I think our peak month was almost 900 units, and our lowest month was about 470, I believe. So quite a wide band there. I think we'll probably fall somewhere in the middle, and we have the capacity to support customer demand, so it's really just going to come to how many customers feel they're finally ready to go electric. And there's a lot behind that, obviously, to what will determine when they're ready, but we are here to at least support that, and we have the capacity to do so.
Yeah, the strategy of designing this vehicle as an Audi first, you know, and you know, obviously electric first, but really, you know, an electric vehicle that has the characteristics of an Audi. How are customers responding to that? And you know, do you think that could be a challenge in getting some conquest customers? And
Great question. So I would say we hit the nail on the head with that. We designed it to be a normal car, normal Audi first, and that's our target buyer for this was really the wide range of existing traditional ICE SUV buyers, and that's exactly what we're seeing with people who are buying e-trons currently. They're coming out of traditional ICE SUVs. So whether it be our Q5 or Q7 and switching to the e-tron, or BMW X5, GLE, Lexus RX, things like that, those customers are also coming over as well. We're seeing a smaller portion of existing EV customers actually coming to the car. Given our direct competitors being Jaguar I-Pace and Model X in that, you know, premium SUV segment, both of those cars have only been combined on sale for a few years, so perhaps those customers aren't quite ready to make the jump to another new vehicle yet, which is why we didn't want to specifically make this car one that targeted only current EV buyers, because the pool is just so small. So I would say it's been a success in terms of conquesting new buyers from not only within the brand who are driving ICE vehicles, but also outside the brand.
Are you getting a significant number of conquest buyers, ICE conquest buyers, like from Audi, BMW, Mercedes, and
so the split between current Audi owners and competitor ICE vehicle owners is almost exactly 50-50. Okay. So we're keeping 50% of e-tron buyers who are coming from the Audi family, but also conquesting 50% from outside of Audi.
How are customers responding to the range of this thing? Yeah, obviously, you know, we can talk all we want about 200 miles of range being plenty, you know, and from a purely rational argument, that's totally true. But as you know, car buyers are not necessarily always rational. You know, and the fact, you know, I would hardly call it a rational choice to buy, you know, a lot of the high-performance cars that we have. So how are they responding to the range of this car?
So, great question. The number one actual rejection reason that we're seeing for customers who don't want to buy the e-tron is the range figure. But then also one of the big things that we're seeing from customers who have purchased the e-tron is that they're saying 204 miles is completely enough for what I need. And if I need to go on a longer trip, I can charge up quickly at the 150 kilowatt EA station. So I think it's a matter of getting the customer to experience the car, which is still sometimes somewhat of a struggle, but once they do actually experience it and live with it, they see how much better it is to wake up with a full 204 miles every morning, to never have to go to a gas station, just be able to do everything from the comfort of your own home, and see that 200 miles is actually really enough for more than what they need.
What about what's the response been like from dealers? Because in the past, other manufacturers, or more so from customers of other manufacturers, have complained that dealers have been reluctant to sell them EVs, or they go in wanting to look at an EV, looking at a Leaf or any other EV, and the salespeople push them towards ICE cars. How's the Audi dealer body been responding to the e-tron?
Well, so Jacob had a great point, which I'll get to in just a second. But what we did when we launched the e-tron, prior to launching the e-tron, was we took our dealers through the most extensive training probably they've ever gone through for a new vehicle launch. We took them over to Germany to actually experience the car well before it launched here in the U.S. and do a real, I think it was 3 or 4 day crash course of all things e-tron and all things electrification to get them ready to be able to actually talk to customers. And then beyond that, we also have a team here, boots on the ground in the U.S. that takes these cars once they arrive in the U.S. to dealerships, trains the dealers again, refreshes their memory on everything that they learned in Germany, and really make sure that they're ready once the car is there to sell it. And some of the data that Jacob was mentioning that we've gotten through some research that we've been doing is essentially there's actually a quote that a customer went into the dealership, interested in the Q8 and actually ended up leaving with the e-tron, which is exactly the story that we want, because we see that we position the e-tron as being the electric alternative to the Q8 in terms of size, price, everything, packaging. And to hear that a customer actually went in interested in a Q8, left with an e-tron is exactly what we want.
Is that a common thing that you're seeing, or
we're seeing a lot of people who, for instance, there are a lot of people who say that they're looking at high-end premium SUVs. There are people who say that an X5 plug-in is not what they want. They want to go all in. And these are people who've been dabbling with electric and researching for a couple of years, and now there's a compelling product with the name, the reputation, and the quality that they expect for that kind of price point.
Okay. One of the things that with launching this vehicle, it coincided with the rollout of Electrify America. The first real attempt at challenging the supercharger network, with a network that can support all the other EVs out there.
Yep.
Are you finding that when you talk to consumers, is that one of the things that maybe brought them to Audi as a customer? The fact that this network exists and that it's supporting what you guys are doing.
I think it certainly helps, but I think really the thing that's bringing them to Audi is that we have that established sort of trust and reputation for being a car company that you can rely on to build a premium quality product. So I would say that's probably what's bringing them in, and then just being familiar obviously with what our brand is and what we stand for. And then also the Electrify America aspect of it is kind of really just the icing on the cake. And I think some of what we're seeing in terms of the rejection reasons is the fact that a lot of these Phase 1 Electrify America stations were built along highway corridors, so people aren't seeing those every day. So their perception of actual charging stations in the wild is much lower than what the reality of it is, because they're not seeing them every day. So now with Electrify America's Phase 2, where they're focusing on more metro sites, and people are going to be seeing stations when they go to the mall or go to the grocery store or wherever, I think that'll help boost then consumer confidence in charging networks, and then thus get them even more ready to go electric. So
there's a station that opened up in September, about a 10-minute walk from my house. So finally opened up. I saw the chargers were installed there back in early June, and I was waiting. When are they going to open it up? And finally in September it opened.
So really, really great story that we have even from the past 2 months. So in the greater LA area, there were 2 EA stations open for the longest time, and just clearing by all the red tape and getting them all open. Within the last 2 months, we've gone from 2 to 11 in LA.
Oh, okay.
So
total state of California, we're almost at 50 chargers with EA throughout the total state.
50 locations?
Yeah, it's 50 exactly sites, and then each site has anywhere from 4 to I think 8 chargers at those sites. And then by the end of the year there will be even more. So
today's number will double by 2021.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
way more than double.
Way more.
Way more than double.
Okay.
So,
You're right. Okay. Yeah. It's infrastructure's there. Forget it there.
Yeah, now I just need an EV to plug in and actually try it out. You know, I haven't had
a perfect e-tron Sportback for you.
I know. Well, you send me one. Yeah. They've been. Let's jump into Sportback. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think in general, in premium utilities, where there's a coupe variant of a premium utility, I think it's general rule of thumb to account for about 15% of sales, if I'm not mistaken. For Sportback versus the existing Quattro, where do you see that falling? And do you see Sportback being more incremental or perhaps cannibalizing some of the wagon?
Yeah, great question. And so we do analysis on what we expect the customer to be, what we call a target buyer. And what we've seen just based on other cars, ICE cars in that segment, X6, PLE Coupe, things like that, is that they tend to be a little bit younger and a little less oriented with utility. Certainly you'll have some cross-shopping between e-tron and e-tron Sportback, but we expect most of the sales for e-tron Sportback to be on top of e-tron and not really cannibalize it, just because we're seeing those two buyers as completely different people. The e-tron Sportback buyer is going to be a little bit younger. He's going to be a little less focused on their utility needs and more focused on design and making sure that the car that they have represents, how they want to be seen. And I think that's what the e-tron Sportback fulfills really well. Whereas the e-tron SUV is really more for that family-oriented person who needs that extra utility and cargo space in the back. And has that family that they're going to fill that car with.
And the reality is you're actually not losing that much in the Sportback anyway. I think about 2.5 cubic feet.
It's about 2.5 cubic feet, exactly. Yeah.
So it's enough, but for the availability is going to be next summer, right?
Correct.
In the U.S. Is it launching in Europe earlier, or
just ever so slightly? I think it's mid to late spring in Europe, and then about midsummer here in the U.S.
And mechanically, it's all the same as the existing e-tron, right? So
there are some mechanical changes, improvements that we have planned that we're introducing on the Sportback. So we are using more of the 95 kilowatt hour battery pack.
Oh, okay.
So it's from 88% on the e-tron SUV now to 91% that we're using on the Sportback. But that's in a culmination of other software and hardware changes. So now we've also had some thermal management system changes in terms of how we're using the pumps to be more efficient and also improve thermal efficiencies there. And additionally, we've replaced the battery control module to be a new piece of hardware that is not only more efficient but also able to handle that additional usable capacity of the battery.
Does that battery control module include the power electronics, or?
Yeah.
Can you talk at all about what's changing there? Like, are you going to silicon carbide?
I don't have the specific details of that, but I do know that it is more efficient in its power usage, which also helps the range as well. So you're getting efficiencies from that. You're getting more usable capacity out of the battery, and we're also able now to fully disconnect the front axle when it's not being used. So there's actually no current going through the motor when it's coasting, essentially. So that's helping with the efficiency improvements as well. And it's those culmination of things. Obviously, the Sportback has a more aerodynamic body style and shape to it, which also helps with the range. So those culmination of things should help boost the e-tron Sportback's range number.
Will those changes get rolled into the wagon as well at some point?
The SUV, you mean?
Yeah.
Eventually, that's the plan.
Okay. Actually, now I remember what the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the naming is a little confusing. You get e-tron Quattro, e-tron Sportback. Is that going to get kind of rationalized a little bit?
So the reason why I went from e-tron Quattro, now it launched as e-tron.
Okay.
The Quattro was dropped before production because it's sort of like, think of the original Quattro, how it was. That was the name of the car, and then Quattro became basically a variant
designation
car,
of the technology.
A designation. Yeah. So think of this as the e-tron.
Okay.
And then everything else from there will be a branch of an e-tron.
Okay, so e-tron GT and whatever else.
Super e-tron. Yes, this is the e-tron, if that's the way how you kind of position it.
We're looking from a technology standpoint at the advantage that Tesla has had over most other manufacturers in terms of range or overall efficiency. I think a significant chunk of that has come from the fact that they're using silicon carbide power electronics, which gives performance or efficiency advantage. And I know some suppliers like Bosch have recently announced that they're starting to manufacture silicon carbide for power electronics. So hopefully, we'll see Audi and others, start to pump that up. What about the using more of the battery capacity? Is that something that will be rolled out to the e-tron?
Existing e-tron?
Yeah.
So
is it something that could be done perhaps as an update, as a software update?
So we're looking into that. The current way that it was developed was that all of those pieces were kind of developed together. So because we changed the battery control module and all the other changes on the vehicle, that it was all developed together. So we would have to go back and actually test the
revalidate and verify that you're not going to be giving up the durability, which was one of the reasons for the
previous battery control module. Exactly. So we're confident that it's good as it is now. The other aspect that comes into thing is homologating the car again. If we were to do such a thing and actually put a estimated range improvement behind it, we would have to completely re-homologate the car, which is very expensive. So I wouldn't say that we're not doing it, but we're looking into it at this point to see how feasible it could be to do that.
Okay. The Q4 e-tron, when is that arriving? Is that coming in 2020?
So we showed it at Geneva earlier this year, and I believe we said within 2 years of the concept being shown there in Geneva is when we'll have
maybe more like 21, sometime 21.
Yeah, so it should be shortly thereafter than the e-tron GT. So e-tron GT will be first, and then Q4 e-tron will be shortly thereafter.
And the GT is coming by the end of next year?
Correct. At the show last night, we said we should have a very sexy production
lower, wider EV
at the show next year. Exactly.
Okay. And is that still planned to be built on the J1 architecture?
Yep, exactly.
It will be built in the same plant as the R8.
Okay, in Neckarsulm?
Yep.
Yes, it'll be built in Neckarsulm, not Zuffenhausen or Leipzig or anything like that. So.
I think that's pretty much all I've got. Cool. Anything else that I haven't asked about that we should be thinking about?
Market trends. I think that you did hit on, like, a lot of our buyers are coming from traditional SUV people. There have been folks who we've spoken with, just kind of anecdotally, who've said that they've been wanting to go electric for a long, long time, and they just need to figure out what and when made sense to do so. And I'd say along the wave of kind of where these people are, they may not be like, they're definitely early adopters. They may not be first movers, but they are absolutely, a lot of them are, and a lot of them are very early adopters, because we all look at this from a very granular level and kind of on the ground, that you see all of these electrified cars. Most of middle America has not seen these cars yet. Right. So it's we're still very, very early in the process, and we're still seeing a lot of people who want to come in and be early adopters, who want to go electric. On the coast, we see this more as a technology play for why these people are doing this. In the middle of America, especially places that don't necessarily have quite the charging infrastructure, a lot of people who come into these cars are seeing it as they want to do right by the environment. I mean, the people in California clearly do too. Yeah. But we're seeing a lot of people, 69% of people who buy e-trons are buying them because they want to do right by the environment, which is a first for us, because most of the time it's performance or it's design or it's craftsmanship. But when you have 2/3 of the people coming in and saying, the reason I want this is not only do I want that performance and quality, but I want to be environmentally conscious with what I buy and drive and how I present myself, it's a very different dynamic and a very different thought process.
At least one other thing, seeing a lot of other plug-in hybrids coming into the market as well now, from across a number of brands, and also enhancements of plug-in hybrids. BMW is extending the electric range of theirs and so on. Are PHEVs still part of Audi's U.S. strategy? And
check out the Q5 over there.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have 3 coming. Certainly the BEV portfolio is more of our strategy than the PHEV is.
Okay.
But we will have PHEVs to support people who maybe don't feel that they're ready to go full electric yet, but still want to be in an Audi and want to do as much electric driving as they feel comfortable with. But yeah, the majority of our vehicles moving forward will be full BEVs, but we will have some PHEVs to support. Okay. And actually, our global CEO recently announced that our target is now 40% of our vehicle sales by 2025 will be electrified. So plug-in hybrids and BEVs.
Globally, we're planning by about the same period, 30 electrified models, 20 of which will be all electric. So it is an ambitious goal, and it will be rapid.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you know, everybody is moving in this direction now, and it's what's going to be interesting to watch is the consumer adoption. I mean, it's one thing for everybody to put out all these electrified models. The question is, will customers buy them?
But look at Ionity over in Europe, where you have 5 automakers that are all, rather than just Electrified America, where it's largely a Volkswagen.
Yeah, they actually invested
effort,
in the infrastructure directly.
Every automaker over there, and they're all buying into Ion. More and more of them are buying into Ionity every month.
Yeah.
So I think when you see that kind of support from the automakers, and you know that it's not going away anytime soon, it becomes much greater consideration.
And the charger count in 2025 is just going to be ridiculous anyway. So there will be no reason not to get an EV at that point.
Yeah, well, and Ford, they're trying to. That's one of the things that part of their strategy with the Mach-E and their other EVs is actually aggregating the network. So rather than investing directly in a network, pulling it together to try and reduce that friction for customers. As they try to use multiple networks.
So Electrify America announced that they're working on roaming as well, so that'll help bridge that gap as well. So I think the landscape for charging in 2025 is going to be so different that I think these targets that we're setting up are realistic. Okay, great.
And then when you do have the opportunity at some point to drive a plug-in hybrid, it is a 4-cylinder. It is the same engine as a regular 2-liter, but it performs. It is 0 to 60 as fast as an SQ5. It is, and I think that we're breaking down. A lot of people think that a plug-in or a hybrid is supposed to be something easy and slow.
Right.
When your plug-in hybrid is as fast as an SQ5.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a big part of the strategy shift we're seeing is that manufacturers are seeing, the customers don't necessarily want something wheezy and slow.
Yeah.
If they're going to pay this premium price for this electrification, they want it to not only give it better efficiency but also enhance the other attributes of the vehicle. And performance being a primary one, but in other vehicle types and trucks and things, it might be different characteristics, but to enhance other attributes besides that, and performance is
on top of that, you have a $6,700 rebate on a Q5 plug-in, so it puts it down at the price of the normal Q5 at that point.
Yeah, so might as well.
Yep.
All right.
Agreed. Cool.
Matt had a lot of, and it wasn't just Matt too. I don't know who the other voice was.
That was Jacob Brown. Jacob is communications manager at Audi. He's responsible for EV communications, and Jacob used to be at Mazda. That's where I first met him a few years ago, and then he did a stint at Faraday Future, and left there earlier this summer to go to move back to the East Coast to join Audi. And so Jacob had a few comments in there as well.
I think I follow him on Twitter. Does he listen? If he doesn't, he should. But
I'm not sure if he does or not.
He should let us know.
Yeah, that's right. I'll shoot him a note and tell him to listen.
All right, and then send Audis. Send all the Audi EVs because I think that they've got a really solid understanding of what their customers want. Yeah,
well, and when Jacob was still at Mazda, he's the one that sent me the Driving Matters license plate frame for my Miata.
Oh, that's cool. All right, so let's jump into email communications since we made it easier for people to email us at Sam at Wheelbearings?
Feedback at wheelbearings.media.
Right. Well, I didn't know if it was. Yeah, I was going to go with the individual ones, but yes, feedback at wheelbearings.media. There you go.
That's the main one that that gets to everybody, and then there's individual emails for myself and Dan and Rebecca as well. But feedback at wheelbearings.media is where we've been getting most of them. And a couple of weeks ago we asked you to reach out to us, let us know where you're listening from, what kind of stuff you drive, and so we got a whole bunch of emails, which is really cool. We heard from a couple of people in Australia actually, including Dick Wellham in Adelaide, who drives a 2001 Miata, and let's see what else. Here, Rishikesh Mandyam in London, who strangely enough also drives a Miata. He's got
you can drive in London still?
Yeah, you can. I don't know if he lives in central London or on the outskirts, but. There's still plenty of cars there. Guy Hesley, who, let's see, where is Guy from? He doesn't say. But he asked about our opinions on the fact that the Cybertruck offers the performance of a Model S at half the price or twice the capability of a Model 3 at the same price.
It offers none of those things because it's not here. It's not reality.
And and the thing is, you get selective specs. Like most manufacturers, Tesla, when they reveal a vehicle like that, they put, they select which specs to show, and they're not. Some of them are mutually exclusive. For example, you're not going to get for $39,000, the price of a Model 3. You are not going to get 14,000 pounds of towing capability or the performance of a Model S. You're not going to get 2.9 seconds 0 to 60. It's probably going to be more like maybe 5,000 or 6,000 pounds, which obviously is a lot more than a Model 3. But it
might take 5 or 6 seconds.
They're mixing
to get to
and
60.
matching, taking specs from different trim levels.
They're not the only ones. That
$70,000 truck that goes 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds will probably not tow 14,000 pounds. Or if you're towing 14,000 pounds, you're not going to have 500 miles of range. Those things do not go together. You can have one or the other, but not both at the same time.
Right. And that's not us being cranky and disliking Tesla.
That's just physics.
Right.
And business. That same thing applies to every manufacturer.
Right. I was going to say when
Mustang, they launch a new vehicle, they show you the base price. For the Mach-E, they showed $45,000.
Right.
And 300 miles of range, but you don't get 300 miles of range for $45,000.
Right. That's exactly where I was going to go. Was the sort of latest EV to make a splash was the Mustang Mach-E, and they did this. They cherry picked in the same way, and it's fine. Like everybody does it, but just understand we're going to call nonsense on it from time to time.
That's right. That's what we're here for. And from Greece, we had Apostolos writing in to tell us he drives a 2006 all-wheel drive RAV4 and puts Bridgestone Blizzaks on it for the winter, which is great. I drive on Blizzaks. I've done it for decades. They're great. It would be cool to go drive on Blizzaks in European mountains, though. European mountain terrain. Yeah, that would be fun. And we heard from John. Didn't say where he's writing from. Rob in Toronto, who he drives and flies and rides. He's got a 2015 Wrangler, a 2017 Moto Guzzi V7, a 76 Honda CB400F, and a 1959 Cessna F-150. And in the past, he's had an RX-8, a Mazda Protege 5, and a 95 Miata. And interestingly, he claims the 2003 Protege 5 was the best steering car he's owned. Okay,
I can get behind that. It's perpetuating that myth that Canadians love Mazdas.
Yeah, it's not a myth; it's true.
No, it's okay. It's perpetuating the stereotype.
Yeah. And then we also heard from Con in Houston, Texas, and between him and his wife, they drive a Lexus LX470, an IS350, a Toyota Sienna, a 94 Supra with a single turbo, and it's a garage queen. Apparently it's broken again, and a 2004 Honda S2000, which is not being driven enough. Let's see who else. We got Blake in Wisconsin, who drives a Nissan 370Z with a manual transmission. And to Blake and Guy, yes, we are the same Sam and Dan from the Autoblog days. And Rebecca, who probably hadn't heard as much of unless you follow, the kind of the automotive business. Rebecca, has been an analyst for a long time. And if you, watch a lot of the business media, you would have seen her, being interviewed a lot, in places like CNBC and Fox News and other places, on more automotive business related stories. That's kind of where her background comes from. And then let's see. And then Adam Jordison wanted to let us know that he's here, and we thank you very much.
That's right, because we did. We asked for Hello Worlds. That's right.
and Sid from Austin, who he's got 2 family cars: a 2013 Honda Fit Sport, excellent choice, and a 2014 Honda Odyssey, and previously owned Corvettes, Lexus ES, 97 Chrysler Sebring convertible.
Wait, somebody paid for one of those? I'm sorry. In terms
you might have inherited it.
That's true. That's true. Some of us do inherit weird cars. That's true.
First generation Acura Legend, very nice car.
That is an awesome car.
And a 1978 Chevette. And his wife,
T-body.
His wife had a 99 Miata when they first got married. So let's get to this last one here, which is the big one. This is from Abby Beckert in Australia, who had some thoughts on the Cybertruck and responding to our prior discussion of this thing. It's pretty long, so let me just pick out some of the high points. I think the fact that you guys don't fit the target market for a truck, combined with the unconventional design language they've chosen and your general predisposition to dislike Tesla, have all conspired to affect your judgment of this product.
Okay.
Well, let's start with that.
Okay. So I'm a middle-aged guy with a family and a house in the suburbs. So in terms of a truck buyer, I am very much in the target market for a truck. Not exactly as like a contractor or whatever, but there's a lot of pickups on my street. A lot of 4-door pickups and, those mid to higher level trims and stuff. So in terms of what we sell in the US, I certainly am that target market. And you as well, Sam. I know that you have use for a truck.
There's a lot of pickup trucks in my neighborhood. And both of us drive pickup trucks on a fairly regular basis. Well, let me just read the next paragraph of this too, because it ties into this. First of all, I don't think you understand why people buy pickup trucks. It's not so much about hauling heavy or bulky cargo. Sure, they can do both, but their primary use is for dirty cargo that you don't want in the cabin or boot of a car. And for those of us who speak the other form of English, that's the trunk. A mountain bike after riding through mud, a lawnmower covered in grass clippings, a stinky bag of fertilizer, a bale of hay, power tool covered in sawdust, or a wet dog covered in sand after an afternoon at the beach.
This is all true. Although I would never ever put my dog in the back of the truck.
That's right. Dogs do not belong in the bed of a truck. They belong inside and preferably buckled up.
We had the click it sport for the dog, because if you've got an unrestrained dog and you get in an accident, that dog is now a wrecking ball inside your car, and it's going to kill the dog and hurt you. But beyond that, those are all valid uses for a truck. That is all true. But trucks are also designed for much heavier duty uses. There's no reason why you need in a U.S. and North American market pickup, which we should touch on. There's no reason why you need 4-wheel drive, massive ride height, a V8 engine, and a 4-door cab and a 6-foot bed to carry a lawnmower. I can do that. I put lawnmowers in the back of many. I can
put a lawnmower in my wife's Honda Civic.
Right. But yeah, you had mentioned too when we were discussing this, and again, I don't want to get defensive. I don't think we're not programmed necessarily to dislike Tesla as a company. There's a lot of people there that work very hard, and they're trying to design things that are good, and they are pushing the market. I think what our biggest gripe about Tesla is the potential that is there, and the horrible management that is short-circuiting really hardworking people. And if you had a good management team in place and got rid of the demagoguery, that company could really take off. And that's what frustrates me so much. I don't know where you stand on it, but
yeah, totally.
But North American pickups are different than pickups in other markets too.
and especially Australia. I mean, Australia, is kind of a unique market. It was the home of the Ute, and they still, even for more traditional style pickup trucks, they still call them Utes in Australia. But a lot of the market for what we think of as pickup trucks in Australia over the years, and I don't know what Abby drives, but a lot of that market was for car based pickups, more like old style El Caminos. Both Ford and GM, before they got out of the business of building cars in Australia, had they had they had Utes there, that were based on the Holden Commodore and on the Ford Falcon, and that was one of the bigger the more popular types of pickups in Australia. But
right.
they also sell
Maloo.
Could be. I think they had it under various badges over the years. But there's also a fairly substantial market for compact to mid-size pickups. The Toyota pickups, Ford Rangers, are popular there. And those smaller pickup trucks. And while those mid-size trucks are also increasingly popular here in North America, now the Ranger's back. The Toyota Tacoma, the Nissan Frontier, the real heart of the market here is for the full-size trucks, and a substantial proportion of that customer base. Yes, a lot of them are sold to individuals for personal use, especially the light duties. See the F-150s and the Sierra, Silverado and Sierra 1500s and the Ram 1500s. A lot of them are sold to individuals for personal use, for towing trailers and boats and things like that. But a lot of, more than half of them are also sold to commercial users. And, later on in this letter, Abby talks about, commercial customers, who don't, want to leave their stuff out, in the bed of the truck. Actually, in a lot of cases, they do have the stuff out in the bed of the truck. You've got landscapers and contractors, and what they will typically have is racks that slide in, to hold all their tools, and they'll have storage units that are, slide right into the bed to hold their equipment and the supplies that they're carrying. These pickup trucks are often used by, for example, a local water department, or electric utility crews, that, they have, they upfit these things with the equipment that they need for their job. And, while, the Cybertruck, did have, they did show off some bed rail tie down things in there. These are things that you find in all of these trucks. And
I think, yeah,
fact,
I think
very often, much more thoughtfully designed for the actual users of the trucks.
Right. I spend some time, I think, and I think this is maybe where the disconnect is coming from. Like, looking at the Cybertruck, it's not well thought out for the actual for contractors or for those sort of actual heavy duty users of trucks. I spent some time on like the North American Ford website and go to their commercial trucks page. They have the Ram as well. You can look through the upfitter options. There's stuff already on those pages and see that there's already that stuff being made. You can order it right from the dealership. You can finance it. It's all very well thought out. Fleet service is a big thing, and those are my concerns. Like, if you're going to switch your fleet from a bunch of F-150 XLs to test the Cybertrucks, well, guess what? Your basic truck now costs a lot more. And if you have a problem with service or you need parts, they're going to be down. So you're going to be down trucks, where, your F-150 XL, if you're making a fleet buy, you can get those for a very good price, and they're everywhere. And Ford knows how to get you the parts, and you can certainly go to any Ford dealer and get them serviced. So there's a lot of business side concerns that I don't see, and that's fine. There may be a market for a couple 100,000 trucks that are not the big players, and that's fine. I really do want to see an electric pickup come to market. The size of this thing, not good. Like, it just doesn't fit in places. I don't think the idea of an exoskeleton is real smart in this end of the market. The thing that happens with trucks is the bodies get damaged when you're making a work truck. If it's a personal use truck, that's different. And there are a lot of trucks that are used, like cars, like sedans, that target market that we talked about at the top of this, where, we're just the suburban kind of truck user. That's a slightly different story. I think there are a couple 100,000 people with, enough money who would buy one of these. And that's fine. Design aside, I'm not really concerned about the design. It's not, it doesn't look practical to me. But okay. And everybody rolls out prototypes to show. So again, like the fact that it doesn't have mirrors or stoplights, DOT compatibility with fine, whatever. But the production truck is going to have all those things. So they're going to have to think about it at some point. It's just not a real, it doesn't seem like a truck that really understood. They didn't understand what they were making a truck for other than maybe Model S buyers.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to see, once it actually comes to production, what has changed, to make it more useful as a truck, and as well as obviously, as you said, to meet regulatory requirements. I have some real concerns, about, occupant protection, with that structure that they claim, this really rigid structure. Part of the reason why, modern vehicles are designed to have crumple zones is when the structure of the car crumples in a crash, it's actually absorbing a lot of kinetic energy that's not getting transferred into the occupants of the vehicle now. If you've got something as rigid as they claim this thing is, then there's nowhere for that energy to go. It's going to get transferred directly through the structure, through the seats to the occupants. And so now you have to find a way to provide those occupants with the protection so they don't get injured. It's not as simple as just having a really rigid structure. There's a lot more. It's a much more complex issue. And just some of the practical matters like visibility. I think visibility is going to be a real issue out of this thing. But
yeah, it's not the 50s. Like cars that crumple, like that's not a bad thing. That argument, and I still hear it, like, oh, you can't hit anything with these cars. They just come apart. It's and then you open the door.
It's that way for a reason.
The door opens, and then you walk away with your intact limbs.
Yeah,
where your head having
a few
bashed
bruises
the
or scratches, but you're not dead.
Yeah. And we've seen cars with rigid exoskeletons, right? Like what's the very small Renault, or even the smart car, right? Because they were so small, they had
the Twingo
rigid structure. And what they would do was they would consume some of the crash structure of whatever they hit, and they would sort of be relying on you to hit something larger.
Yeah, or they would, what would often happen if you can find videos online, for example, of a smart car being crashed into a Mercedes E-Class.
Right.
And what you often see in that case, because the Smart was so light, you had this rigid structure because there was no physical space for a crash zone. Rather than crushing, that energy would be dissipated by the car literally bouncing off the other vehicle.
Yeah, so then you have a bunch of secondary impacts.
Yeah, which could, is problematic, but
yeah. Either way, like there's only so many paths for that energy to go, and I'd rather have it go through the structure of a vehicle than through my body. Quite honestly.
But this is a topic that we'll be discussing for probably at least the next 3 years.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah, but I really we're not predisposed to dislike Tesla, but we're going to call nonsense when there's nonsense. And this Cybertruck rollout thing has been nonsense. It's been brilliant at getting, coverage in the media for Tesla. And it's been making all of these people who aren't very thoughtful about the auto industry and the car and truck market to say that, this puts the nail in the coffin of of Ford and GM. And I think that's complete nonsense. And really, we should thoughtfully look at it. And it's not because it's styled weird. That's fine. I'm fine with weird styling, but it's just, it didn't seem like a very well thought out effort. And so that's what has bugged me about the Cybertruck. And I think the Rivian stuff is actually much better thought out. And at the end of the day too, like, these are not binary choices. We don't need to choose between, one or two very expensive high-end electric trucks. Like, there's other ways around this stuff that don't involve vehicles at all or involve other modes of transportation that we should probably be looking at. So,
like renting a truck when you need one.
Yeah. There are no easy solutions. It's just sort of like, let's look at it.
My philosophy has always been that a truck is a great thing to be able to borrow.
Absolutely. That's why every time I get a truck as a median, I'm like, all right, where do I need to go? What do I need to take to the dump? That kind of stuff. So,
all right. Well, let's wind it up. And thanks to everybody for writing in, and keep those emails coming. That feedback at wheelbearings.media, and we will keep trying to address them every week.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.